نسل رپ قسمت 39. در هفته گذشته قسمت اول از مستند مجرمان کپی رایت رو برای شما پخش کردیم و امروز قسمت دوم این مستند رو برای شما آماده کردیم تا بیشتر با این سنت در این فرهنگ آشنا بشید. مجرمان کپی رایت، کارگردان بنجامین فرانزن، ترجمه و زیرنویس بهرام نورایی.
Once people in the industry got wind of the fact that the courts were not interested in listening to young black men describe their creative processes, they had no tolerance for that. A new industry emerged, the industry of sampling clearances. That meant that groups like Public Enemy could no longer make their powerful sounds in the way they wished to.
And record companies are beginning to put more pressure on the artists, you know, to disclose the samples from the very, very beginning.
I think it was Stakes is High, where it was the first album I recall where we sat down in the beginning of the album. Like the record company made sure, like, you know what, let's make sure we speak to our whoever you want to clear samples. And they went through a list of like, well, George Clinton's in litigation with Westbound, so don't mess with his stuff right now. George Harrison don't like rap, don't mess with him. Like we actually had a list of people not to touch.
When you're going through a rights clearing process, you really need to identify all the different people who own all potential elements of that particular sample or musical element and make sure that they've agreed to what you want to do. And that can be very time consuming because there's a lot of people involved in making music.
To create requires the permission of somebody else. And it's that transformation which has been radical and recent.
Our Copyright Act was basically last rewritten in 1976. So we're operating with a lot of antiquated assumptions about what musical creativity is.
It is cheaper, easier, and more predictable if you want to cover somebody's song entirely than if you want to take 3 seconds of somebody's song. That doesn't make any sense. Why should an entire song be easier and cheaper to do than 3 seconds of somebody's song?
Well, they're here on Gilligan's
You have the right to cover any record as long as you don't change the words. You could cover Stairway to Heaven, but if you try to change the words and make it Stairway to Gilligan's Island, which someone tried to do, Led Zeppelin will shut you down in 2 seconds.
The Maid was a mighty sailing man, skipper brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour.
Should an artist be able to say, you can't take my Stairway to Heaven and make it Stairway to Gilligan's Island or anything else, or you can't use it on a hip-hop record. You know, you can't take it out of context for anything else. You can't recontextualize what I've done. It has to stay true to the original.
Just like you. To relax my mind so I can be free.
If I go to somebody and I want to sample a Marvin Gaye lick and I go to Marvin Gaye's estate, I might have to pay, like some people did Eric Sermon, I believe, over $100,000 to sample one song in advance.
Let's look at the factors that determine how much it's going to be. Obviously, a factor is going to be what is the economic viability of the work you're sampling? Is it something like the Beatles that is hugely viable in the economic stream? Or is it something that's pretty obscure? Are you taking some R&B song and recording that is lost in the vault and you've brought it back to life? That's a whole nother level.
Records like It Takes a Nation of a Million to Hold Us Back, 3 Feet High and Rising, they're kind of like artifacts of an earlier time, records that couldn't exist today. They're just legally, financially untenable.
And them cats is like, man, you know, that's our style. You know, like now you tell me that my style is too expensive, you know?
I think of what started happening in trip hop, you know, with artists like Tricky and Portishead and Bjork, and what they started doing to their samples. They'd play a guitar riff, press it up, record it, press it up on vinyl, and sample it off of the vinyl. just to have the effect of it being sampled.
Our thing about sampling was, you know, there's the confusion element in it, because we know we had to be confusing because we didn't want people coming after us.
People started to get pretty savvy about what they were sampling and then how they would mask it.
So we would make it a game for you to like try to figure it out. Okay, try to figure out where this came from. You can go all day long, and I know you won't find it.
They could change the tone. They could change. They got so much technology today. They can the speed go up or whatever they want to do with it, and I won't even know it's me.
It is more difficult to make a record than it is to sample it. You know, that's patently obvious. I guess I'm more concerned with the 20 years or so that got the musician to the point where he could make the record, that then is important to the listener because of what in his life has brought him to making that record.
I didn't know anything about sampling until people come up and say some artist is using your drum pattern. I go, cool. I'm Clyde Stubblefield, the original funky drummer, as they say. I joined James Brown Band in 1965. And I stayed with him until 1970. I played on Give It Up, Turn It Loose, I'm Black and I'm Proud, Cold Sweat. That's Cold Sweat.
I don't care about your past.
I just started playing. Doom, pop, doom, doom, pop, doom, pop, doom, pop, boom, boom, pop, doom, doom. And the bass player came in, doom, doom, doom. And then the guitar player came in. And the rhythm was there. When James came in, heard, said, "Yeah, I like that." Then he started putting lyrics. I don't care. Then they put the horns in. We had a song. And I started it. But we said, okay, Cold Sweat. That was mine. He didn't tell me what to play. Asked me to play. I played what I felt, but he owned it. So
you take a drummer like Clyde Stubblefield, you know, who plays the funky drummer, and James is like, you know, take it, Clyde, and he goes ahead and takes his break, and that break ends up becoming, you know, one of the bases for a whole bunch of sample-based records.
I never got a thanks. I never got a hello, how are you doing, or anything from any of the rap artists or anything. The only one I got a thanks from was Melissa Etheridge.
His name never appears on any of those compositional credits. His name is not part of the legal legacy of all of those great tunes he played on. He doesn't get royalties. He got paid for the time in the studio.
The producer or the publisher of that particular track is getting compensated for the use of that sample, but the artist that originally played that drum break that got sampled is not necessarily getting any compensation for it.
So many groups unsample my stuff. They say I'm the world's samplers, #1 samplers drummer, so hey, I haven't got a penny for it yet though, but.
Yes, the rhythm's a rebel. Without a pause, I'm lowering my level. Just cause I'm from the CPT, pump police are afraid of me, huh? It's a demo.
I can't be sure if that's my drum pattern. If it's a little snap, I can't be sure. But that's where honesty come in. A person could say, yeah, that is your drum pattern. Then we discuss things. Otherwise than that, I cannot go to no one and say, hey, you're using my drum pattern. If it's just a little ta-da-ta, I don't know that was me, you know.
Swingers, oh, the jungle
it's real easy to look at the big picture and say that the money doesn't always go to the people who do the most creative work.
Clyde Stubblefield is still playing out today. You know, he has a regular gig in Madison on Mondays, and he goes on tour. He was on tour actually with DJ Kool Herc recently. And you listen to him, and he's still got it all. You know, still playing Give It Up, Turn It Loose with all the fire that he had back in 1971.
Oh, my music is my life. My music is my breathing.
One of the things that sampling has done is that it's revitalized a whole bunch of musicians' careers. At the time that a lot of hip-hop producers started sampling George Clinton, his records weren't available commercially anymore. So hip-hop literally reintroduced the world to George Clinton.
It really helped us a lot because it actually, people heard it and got to know who it was, and then they wanted to hear the long version of the sample songs.
Doggy, 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 oh.
Rick James' biggest record was by MC Hammer. You know, I mean, there's many, many examples of an original record being outsold by the cover or the remake that used part of it.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
Even Gangsta's Paradise did much more than Pastime Paradise by Stevie Wonder, like 10 times more. And that was Stevie Wonder. Who the hell is Coolio?
Been spending most of their lives living in a pastime paradise. Been spending most of their lives living in a gangster's paradise.
So sampling usually is viewed as a musical thing, right? But if you look at the art world, for example, you have Andy Warhol taking photographs and painting them. You have different photographers taking certain scenes and reconstructing them digitally. It all implies a layer of collage and pulling together bits and pieces.
Fact is, look at how any bit of culture is made. Look at how Shakespeare made culture. Look at how every great poet, how Homer made culture. It's about collage. It's about taking bits and pieces of your influences and forging them into something newer and stronger.
Think about the way Walt Disney was creative, right? All of Disney's greatest works were taking other people's works and doing something different with them.
I've never really heard a completely original musical idea by anyone. Most musicians will say that the best musicians copy.
Hey boy, hey, what you doing, man? Hey, what you gonna do? That ain't the piece we supposed to play. Come on. Well, I guess I better get on in here with it.
Jazz musicians, when they ad-lib and happen to do a cover of somebody's record and they went into their ad-lib and into their riff, you know, you kind of say that that riff and the ad-lib belongs to the musician.
Sykes, that's me. Well, all right.
You can also look at the blues, and for that matter, you can look at anything. I mean, melodies have always been borrowed.
So bad.
mashups are an interesting case. I mean, they sort of demonstrate how simple it is to make music this way, because virtually everyone has made a mashup.
Danger Mouse is a hip-hop producer who created this thing called the Gray Album, right? He took Jay-Z's acapellas from the Black Album and he cut up the music from the Beatles' White Album and put them on top of each other.
Now I ain't trying to see no highway chase with Jake. Plus I got a few dollars, I could fight the case. So I pull over to the side of the road. I heard, son, do you know why I'm stopping you for? Cause I'm young and I'm black and my hat's real low. Do I look like a mind reader, sir? I don't know. Am I under arrest or should I get some more? Well, you was doing 55 and the 54.
The Gray Album came out. There was, I think it was just a limited edition thing that was in some promo form. It was just supposed to be kind of fun. And somehow it got out further than they expected, came to the attention of the record label, I believe EMI.
EMI sent out all these cease and desist letters to Danger Mouse and folks who were trading the album, and really tried to squelch the album altogether and to kind of stamp it out of existence.
Any attempts to sample the Beatles, for example, on the sound recording side are going to be very tricky to do and pretty much impossible to do. The Beatles actually, in Revolution number 9, it's a whole 9 minutes of them using a lot of stock sound recordings into this new work.
Number 9. Well, of course, EMI's lawyers got wind of it. EMI controls the sound recordings to the White Album, and EMI decided that the Gray Album shall be no more.
What's interesting about the Gray Album is that the artist himself didn't seem to have any interest in trying to protest this or see it as a point of which to struggle or resist. It was really fans of the work. It was other people who cared about these issues that came in. They took the work and started posting it up online everywhere.
Danger Mouse won, EMI lost. This album, if it were actually for sale, might have been one of the biggest hits of 2004. Another of the absurdities of the music industry is that nobody made a dime. Nobody made a dime from one of the most successful albums of 2004, and it didn't have to be that way. If we had a more rational system for dealing with samples, then perhaps somebody deserving would have been able to make a little bit of money off of this amazing phenomenon. But as it turned out, we still got to dance to it, and that was good.
The ability now to mash up and create new songs, I guess, has really been facilitated by digital technologies, where it kind of democratizes that process. You don't need to have a recording studio and lots of fancy equipment. You can basically do it just on your computer or in the privacy of your home with tools that are relatively easy to acquire.
Sampling is the kind of technology that's really shifted the way that people consume and produce culture. The consumers have become producers.
It came out of the studios, the professional recording studios, and into the bedroom. And that, changed the music industry to a large extent, and the reverberations of that are still going on.
What we do is remix video musically. We take videos, music, beats, and mix them all together into something new.
It's just like composing with, like if you were to drum on pots and pans, It's just finding out what sounds where and then play them, So you can just arrange them on your timeline, put them in the right place to make the right little rhythm or riff. Anything that can be put onto audio and video together is fair game for us. you know, we don't have the backing of a label. So we're just out there in the world interacting pretty much directly with people.
The way we exist is on the internet, and we operate almost immediate publishing of what we're doing on the internet. And we've received no cease and desists and no person going, how dare you touch my content. It's never happened.
Throw your hands up in the air, don't ever disrespect.
What we do is so transparent that it's a remix. You know, we're literally moving the video with our hands, we're dropping classical music over beats, and the speed and the way we mix it continuously means you couldn't mistake it for anything else. It is inevitably and ostensibly a remix.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Got arrested at the Mardi Gras for jumping on the float. My man MCA's got a beard like a Billy Goat.
I don't see like what we're doing is like stealing, because we're so obviously representing those acts.
The whole point of what we do is that we sample. It's not some feature of what we do, it's all we do. Just totally illegal, insanely illegal, you know, and impossible to clear. It would be impossible to release what we release if you did it through legal channels. You know, it can only exist on in the kind of mixtape form.
Some DJ Jazzy jerks out there over on the internet. So take a good look at my face. You'll see my smile looks out of place. If you look closer, it's easy to trace.
I think hip-hop producers, you know, have to be a lot more cautious than they were 25 years ago. I think they understand fully that ultimately they're going to pay the bill, right? At the end of the day, the sample clearance is going to come out of their pocket, you know? So I think that that's changed the way that producers think about how they put music together.
Where I used to start a song was, if I heard some on a record that I liked, I'm snatching it. And I'm starting there. But now it's a little different. Now where I start is a little more cautious.
Maybe I was wrong with sampling of a beat, but my thing is that sometimes you can't put soul in a bottle. You can't quantify soul by a person that just got a briefcase and just sits down and thinks that everything soulful is actually exclusive.
As much as everyone else seems to have a problem with it, we're still doing it. We're still just getting on with it, and people are bringing out technology to help us the whole time. And now we work with the companies that make all the technology we use, you know? They invented the technology so that people like us could use it and have fun and make music and progress and move on. Wouldn't that be nice if we could just get on with it?
I mean, you have some kid in the Bronx with 2 turntables who could be a musical Einstein and has the genius idea for a record that could do 50 million copies and change the world. You can't do it.
I think artists that sample and ignore copyright law are not in business. I mean, what about if that artist has a hit song and somebody else is going to sample their song? You know, what goes around comes around. There are rules of the game. There's a copyright. You have to get permission. You know, I can't go and walk I can't walk in your house and just sit down on your couch and go to your refrigerator and take a glass of milk out. I mean, there are rules.
I'm allowed to have an opinion on whether or not sampling is cool, and as it turns out, most of the time it isn't, you know. But I don't think we need to get the law involved, you know. I think the law is involved in way too many things already.
The other thing that you see happening is, you know, sampling going back underground, like way underground. You know, for a bunch of artists who, you know, feel like, hey, I'm going to be outlaw about it. You know, because sampling law has created two classes. You're either rich enough to afford the law, or you're a complete outlaw.
If you can catch me, then I didn't do my job. Straight up. It's my fault.
You know, it's just something that we definitely have to think about, because we're looking at it at a level where, like, man, if we did get hit with something, what, you know, how the hell are we going to afford to really deal with it, you know?
If you're using little pieces and little ahams from James Brown or whatever, I think those should be like kind of like giveaways.
I prefer to get my name on the record saying this is Clyde playing. Instead of, the money is not the important thing. Just to get myself out in the world, knowledgeable with my name is the more important.
I think ultimately it's up to every artist, if they're gonna borrow something from somebody, to pay respects to the persons that they borrowed it from.
That's how society moves forward. It doesn't just invent new things. It evolves through taking old things and changing them.
اما با ما تنها از طریق صفحه فیسبوک نسل رپ و ایمیل naslerap@gmail.com در ارتباط باشید.